deserving individual essentially are إنما الصدقات, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها. There are different categories. So essentially, zakat has to be paid to someone who is deserving. Now, one example is a Muslim is a deserving individual. Non-Muslims aren't deserving. Now, they may be deserving of certain non-Muslims, certain types of non-Muslims may be deserving of other types of sadaqah, but they can't receive zakat. Right? That's one simple thing. And with this intention, meaning when I'm giving out zakat, I can't have the intention of any other sadaqah. I can't say I gave away $1,000 in sadaqah last month. I'll just calculate that in my zakat. I gave away $1,000 in sadaqah in January. Now I'll just calculate that within my zakat as if I gave away $1,000 zakat. No, when I'm giving away zakat, giving away a certain amount of money, it has to be with the intention of zakat. It can't be with the intention of any other sadaqah, right? It can't be something which we did just for some good cause. It has to be with the intention of sadaqah. So every single part of this definition is very, very deliberate, and you just need to keep that in mind. Now the overall ruling of zakat is that we shouldn't, unnecessarily delay it, and it results into a sin. Then unnecessarily delaying zakat, when an individual has and can pay it, unnecessarily delaying zakat is then problematic. It's sinful. So that's something we should be avoiding, right? Every single year we want to take out zakat, unless and until there's a valid excuse, which causes a delay in paying zakat. Then that may be excused. But generally speaking, an individual should pay their zakat on time. Right? There shouldn't be any delay. Now, when we speak of zakat, first thing that we need to look at is what are the things that we need to calculate our zakat on? What are our zakatable assets, right? Now, in our zakatable assets, what we're looking at is we have cash. No matter cash at hand is always going to be zakatable. It's something that we're going to calculate our zakat in. It doesn't make a difference whether you're saving that cash, whether you're holding on to it. You're trying to save up to buy a car. You're trying to save up to buy a house. You're trying to save up to build a masjid. It doesn't make a difference why you're holding on to the cash. As long as you have cash, whether it's for your basic needs or otherwise, cash at hand is always going to be zakatable. Now, second thing is we're looking at stocks. We're looking at the value of the stocks, essentially. Right? When we're looking at the value of the stocks, whatever the value of the stock is on the day when zakat became fard on us, we're going to count the value of the stocks. Essentially, stocks is going to be considered in things that we trade with, right? So it's considered a part of our business assets, essentially. Now, keep in mind, when we have assets, we have generally two types of assets. Right? They're going to be basic needs, and they're going to be things that are not considered within basic needs. Things that are generally there for trade, for business, right? Inshallah, we'll come to that. Now, the third zakatable asset that we're covering is our 401k. Now, there's always the vested and the unvested or non-vested 401k. The vested amount is what is going to be within our ownership, and therefore zakat has to be calculated on the vested amount of the 401k. The non-vested or the unvested amount is not going to be considered when calculating zakat. Now, gold and silver, and this is a very common question, right? Generally, and this question comes from the women generally, which is if I'm not, the gold and silver that I use for my day-to-day, which is in my day-to-day use, do I have to calculate that in zakat? Irrelevant of what shape or form the gold and silver is in, it always is going to fall within our calculation of zakat. Now, keep in mind, every individual is responsible for their own zakat. The husband responsible for his zakat, wife responsible for her own zakat. Now, we'll come to this as well, where the wife's zakat is going to be then separate than the husband's zakat. So we're looking at gold and silver. If the husband doesn't have any gold and silver, he's not going to be calculating his wife's gold and silver into his zakat, right? If he pays it, that's a separate question. Now, when he's calculating his own zakat, he's not going to be calculating his wife's gold and silver. She's going to calculate her zakat in gold and silver, and he's going to calculate his zakat, whether he has gold or silver or not, irrelevant of that. But again, any gold and silver in any shape or form is going to be a zakatable asset. Okay. Now, resale property, there's a difference between a resale property and a rental property. A rental property is not going to be calculated within zakat. A resale property, which is essentially, in other words, somewhat of your business inventory of houses, is going to be calculated as zakat. So if an individual has a house which he rents out to a family, now he's not going to calculate the value of that house when he's calculating his zakat. He's not going to add the value of the house to his zakat calculation. Essentially, what he wants to consider is that if he bought a house to sell it, now that is going to fall within his calculation of zakat. Business inventory is a zakatable asset. An individual has, he sells iPhones. He has about 20 iPhones. The value of those iPhones is going to be calculated within his zakat. So these are essentially the zakatable assets, things that we're going to calculate our zakat in. Now, one of the questions that comes along with this is that, yes, someone may have made a lot of money, but at the same time, they have a lot of expenses as well. So we're going to look at what are the valid expenses that we have that we can subtract and things that we cannot subtract from when calculating our zakat. One of the things that we can calculate or we can subtract is unpaid zakat of the previous years, right? Let's just say someone was unable to pay their zakat for the last 10 years, and then they had a shift and they changed their life, mashallah. Now they want to they calculated their zakat for the last 10 years. Now, when presumably, let's take a scenario, right? If this individual has $50,000 cash at hand, that's the only zakatable asset that he has. He has $50,000 cash at hand, but the zakat that he owes from the previous years is, let's just say, $10,000. So when he's calculating his zakat, he's going to calculate zakat for $40,000, not $50,000. Why? Because the $10,000 is already owed in zakat. Therefore, he won't add it in his zakat calculation. Now, debts which are due within 1 year. Generally, you have two types of debts, right? Debts that are due at the moment, right? And then debts that are long term. For one simple example is, most people, they buy houses, they buy cars, and these are essentially, they finance them. So presumably, as you say, their finance is on 0% finance, right? Now what you have is the car is for $30,000, $40,000, and then the individual, he has cash at hand he has $10,000 at hand. Now it's not that he owes someone $40,000. It's true. However, he's only going to calculate the amount that he has to pay to the dealer, or he has to pay to the dealer in that year, which may be, for example, $3,000. So when calculating zakat on $10,000, he has a $3,000 debt, which is through his car. That $3,000 is not the complete debt. It's only the debt that is due this year. So he's going to subtract that amount and calculate his zakat from $7,000. Similarly, if an individual, he has payments for his house, he's only going to subtract that amount which he has to pay in this year. Similarly, you also have taxes on your houses. You have taxes on your houses and things of that nature, which are due. Now you're also going to then subtract those. Incurred expenses versus potential expenses, right? Now, for example, if I bought a laptop, it's charged on my credit card. I didn't get any receipt. I didn't get anything back. That's an incurred expense. Now, when calculating my zakat, let's just say, you bought a laptop, very expensive laptop for, let's just say, $5,000. Now you have cash at hand, $50,000. What you're doing is that you're calculating your zakat from not $50,000, but rather from $45,000. Why? Because you incurred an expense of $5,000. Although you may not have been charged at the moment, that's fine. You may have not gotten the receipt even yet, that's fine. But you incurred that expense, and that's going to be considered within your subtraction. Right? You're going to subtract that away from your zakat calculation. Now, what you can't do is, from invalid subtractions, is something which you are saving up for, like what we mentioned earlier. What we have is an individual who's saving up for a noble purpose. Again, I gave the example of an individual who's saving up to build a masjid. Now it's his personal money, he has cash at hand. What he's doing is that he has an account and he keeps on putting money in that account. Why? He's saving up to build a masjid. Now the question is whether he can, somehow subtract that amount. So let's just say he has $50,000 in his account simply to build a masjid. He's saving up to build a masjid. And besides that $50,000, he has an additional $10,000. Now, when calculating zakat, he won't have the feasibility to subtract the $50,000 because it's for a noble purpose and it's to build a masjid, and only pay zakat or calculate zakat on the 10,000. Essentially, what he's going to do is that although he's saving up, whether it's for a noble purpose or not, he has to pay zakat. The reason why savings for noble purposes is that's a more general question, where that's a more common question where people ask, I'm saving up, so I can get full on, someone married. I'm saving up so I can, get my dad a car. I'm saving up so I can, help my parents. It's true. However, it's not an incurred expense at the moment. However, it's not a debt. It's none of those things which will add up, which are going to be considered as a subtraction. So as long as an individual has cash at hand, any zakatable asset at hand, even though he may be storing it for a noble purpose, is still going to be considered within one's zakat. It's still going to be calculated within one's zakat. Potential expenses is that, like I need this, I have the list of my groceries, panned out. I know exactly what I buy. I know from my experience for the last 30 years that every single year my groceries are going to cost me $10,000. Now, when I'm calculating the zakat, do I essentially subtract the groceries that I'm going to, silly example, but the groceries that I'm going to buy in the next year, which is going to be worth $10,000. No. Why? That's not an incurred expense. It's a potential expense. Right? Another example is that I wish to buy a car. I need a car. I'm in a dire need for a car. I'm saving up for that. Am I going to subtract that? No. I'm not going to subtract unless I buy the car and then I incur the expense. Potential expenses are not considered. Incurred expenses are what are considered. Second is who is liable to give zakat and who is eligible to receive zakat. Okay. Now, people who are liable, we discussed who is liable to, what are the areas in which we calculate zakat and what are the areas in which we don't calculate zakat. Now, essentially now what we're looking at is people who have to calculate. Now, individuals who are liable to give zakat are all sane adult Muslims. All sane adult Muslims. I'll get to the questions in a bit, inshallah. So individuals who are liable to give, actually, before we move on, let's take the questions over here. So we have one question, which is, can we deduct the amount of debts due within a year? Yes, we can. So if I owe on my house, I have to pay on my house $15,000, right, this year. That's the amount that I have to pay. I'm owed this year. I can subtract that from my zakat calculation. So, and yes, and we also touched on 401k, which is the vested amount is going to be calculated in one's zakat. Non-vested or the unvested amount is not going to be calculated in our zakat calculation. Any other questions? Okay, let's move ahead. Now, individuals who are liable to give zakat, we're discussing individuals who are liable to give zakat and who are eligible to receive zakat. And we'll also discuss, inshallah, whether one can be neither, essentially. He's not liable to give, he's not eligible to receive either. We'll discuss that as well. Now, no, in mortgage payments, you're not going to, if someone has an interest on their mortgage, they're not going to consider that within their calculation of zakat. So the question is, mortgage payments, do mortgage payments include principal and markup? So if someone is paying interest on their mortgage, that the interest amount is not something which is technically owed in Islam. So therefore it's not going to be considered. Moving on. Now, we'll get back to the questions in a bit again, inshallah. Zakat is liable by all sane adult Muslims. So if, ma'adallah, if someone passes away and they have young children, now, presumably this individual was rich, mashallah, and he left a lot of money for his kids. Now, if his kids are, although saying they're not adult, Islamically, they're not baligh, then essentially they don't have to pay zakat, right? They're not liable, just like they don't have to pay salah until salah it's not that they don't have to pay salah. Salah is not fard on them. Similarly, zakat is not fard on them until they become adult, Islamically. Now, possession of the nisab of 87.48 grams of gold. I'll leave the calculation to you guys, inshallah. And obviously, the value of gold changes every single day. So 87.48 grams. There is an opinion for there's an opinion for silver as well, and there's an opinion for gold. And there's you can read up, inshallah, on if you're interested, you can read up on the American Fiqh Academy, and why we adopt the gold standard versus the silver standard. Okay. And now, the second is possession of nisab, which is 87.48 grams of gold. Okay, we're taking the gold standard for now, which is, to be completely honest, the reason why we don't, I wouldn't to not take away from the credit of the academic research. One of the reasons why we do take the gold standard over the silver standard is because it's just more practical. And if you are interested, again, you can look in the articles of American Fiqh Academy, inshallah. The third point is fluctuations during the year are ignored. Now, essentially, if a person has $10,000 at the beginning of the year, and in the middle of the year, right, we're in the middle of the year, and when we say year, we're not considering a solar year, meaning we're not saying from 1st January to next 1st January. No, we're considering from the 1st of Muharram, for example, or the 1st of Ramadan to the next Ramadan, lunar years. Okay. Fluctuations during the year are ignored, essentially meaning that if you had $10,000 at the beginning of Ramadan, and during the year, you only had $500 left. At a point, you only had $500 left. Now, when Ramadan came back, you not only do you have 10,000, but you now have $15,000. So when you're calculating your zakat, you're going to look at the 15,000, and you're not going to consider the fluctuation that happened during the year, right? Now, the next is liability is not contingent on liquidity, meaning that essentially if an individual has only $500, or let's just say he only has $100 cash, that's the only liquid asset. That's all he has from his liquid assets. Everything else he has is either business inventory or something else. There are zakatable assets, however, they're not liquid assets, right? Simply because they're not liquid assets doesn't mean that they're not zakatable, right? His business inventory may not be a liquid asset, may not be liquid. However, it's still zakatable. Okay. So liability to pay zakat is not based off of whether you have liquid assets or not. Okay. Let's go to the next. This is in the last we discussed in relation to who's going to pay zakat. Now we're discussing who's in relation to someone who is going to be receiving zakat. Now, individuals who are eligible to receive zakat, right? Now we'll discuss the recipients in a list, but before we go to that, it's possible that one is neither liable nor eligible to receive zakat. An example of that is a person, he has multiple houses. They're not for sale, they're on rent, right? He has multiple houses. Again, they're not for sale, they're on rent. And he has multiple cars. He doesn't use all of them. He only uses one of them. He's a car fanatic. He doesn't use all of his cars. He uses maybe one or two of his cars. The rest of he's a collector. He collects multiple, just cars. So when he's calculating his zakat, he notices that he doesn't have any zakatable assets, meaning all the cash that he got as income, you can say, from his rental properties, he spent it somewhere. Let's just say he spent it in the masjid. Now, when he's calculating his zakat on the 1st of Ramadan, for example, he doesn't have any zakatable assets. He doesn't have business inventory. He doesn't have any cash. He doesn't have any zakatable assets. But at the same time, he has 10 cars, or he has 5 cars. At the same time, he has 3 houses. One house that he's living in, one house that he's given on rent, another vacation home in Florida. Now, his vacation home in Florida was never for the purpose of sale, right? It's not a property which is out for sale. So that's not a zakatable asset. He's not going to calculate that within his zakat. His rental property was not a resale property. So the income that he receives from the rental property, he spent it anyway. He spent it out. Zakat will only apply on the income received from the rental property. It won't apply on the value of the property itself. It'll only apply on the resale, on a resale property. So he has one house, which he's living in, second house, which is a rental property, not a resale, and the third house, which is his vacation home. But he has all of these assets, which are for his personal use. But at the same time, he has no zakatable asset. Does he have to pay zakat? No, he doesn't have to pay zakat. However, can he receive zakat? Is he eligible to receive zakat? He's not eligible to receive zakat. Why? Because it's let's take this scenario where the house that he's living in is worth $100,000. Okay. But the house that he's living in, he's not going to consider that whatsoever. That's not going to be in the picture. The car that he's using is worth again $10,000, or maybe let's just say $30,000. So he has assets that he's using that are his basic needs, and they're also in use. Now, these assets that are his basic needs and they are also in use are not going to be considered at any point. However, when receiving zakat, we're going to look at assets which are technically in the category of basic needs, meaning his personal items. They're not meant for sale, but at the same time, he doesn't intend to use them. They're like his vacation home or his rental property and things of that nature, his extra cars. All of those things, we will consider the value of these assets when receiving zakat, not when giving zakat. Okay. So looking at the fact that he has 7 extra cars and he has 2 extra houses, the value of which adds up and goes above the nisab amount. Let's just say the nisab amount is $5,000, for example. Let's just say, and the value of these houses go above the nisab amount, obviously, which is, for example, the value of these extra personal assets that he has is about $500,000. Can he receive zakat? He can't receive zakat. So he's in the middle, in a state where he can neither give zakat nor can he receive zakat. Okay. The second is what we just mentioned. Nisab calculation includes all items beyond essential needs, right? So his car is essential need. Your house is your essential need. Your clothes are your essential needs. The books that you use to study are essential needs, right? These are all of your essential needs. We never calculate them in zakat. Extra houses, things that are not part of our essential needs, but they're personal nonetheless, are going to be considered when receiving zakat, not when giving zakat. Okay. And again, lack of liquid assets is not a valid criterion. So if someone doesn't have cash at hand, that doesn't mean they can't give zakat. Or the other way around, if simply because someone doesn't have cash at hand, but they have a business inventory, which is worth $10,000, simply because they don't have cash at hand doesn't mean they can receive zakat. Okay. They have to consider all of their zakatable assets and see whether, after that, you have to see whether they're eligible to receive zakat or not. Okay. Let's get to the questions one more time. Now, yes. So again, to clarify, if a person is paying interest on their mortgage, they're only going to consider the principal amount, not the interest amount, okay, when calculating zakat. So the principal amount that they're owed in this year is going to be subtracted when calculating zakat, not the interest amount. Now, in Islamic financing, the entire amount is principal. So you're going to be considering the entire amount. Second is, what is the nisab for cash? Again, the nisab overall is if you're looking at your zakatable assets, and seeing whether they meet the threshold of nisab, which is let's go back here, 87.48 grams of gold. Whatever the value of that is on that day is going to be your nisab. And we're going to take the value of the day on which zakat became fard on you. So let's just say you pay zakat on the 1st of Ramadan, you're looking at that time. Okay. Now, individuals who are recipients of zakat, right? Now that we've gotten out of the way liability of zakat and eligibility of zakat, let's discuss who are the individuals who can receive zakat. Now, there's a difference between there's faqir, and there's miskeen, and there's madyun. These three fall in one category, right? A faqir is a person who owns a certain amount of money. He has assets. He has zakatable assets potentially as well. However, the value of his zakatable assets, whether cash, whether liquid or non-liquid, they don't add up to nisab. So let's just say the nisab amount is $3,000. Okay, let's just say nisab amount is $3,000. This individual has in cash at hand, he has $500, and his business inventory, let's just say, is not, he's a startup business. He doesn't have much inventory. His business inventory adds up to $1,000. So essentially, his zakatable assets are valued at $1,500, and the nisab is at $3,000. Is he going to pay zakat? He's not going to pay zakat. Can he receive zakat? He can receive zakat. Right? So this is a person who has wealth. However, it's less than the threshold of nisab. A poor person, which is a miskeen meaning an individual who doesn't own wealth at all. Okay? So you're going from someone who has some wealth, however, it's below nisab. Right? It's below the threshold of 87.48 grams of gold, or the value of it. The second is that's the first individual who has money, however, it doesn't meet nisab's threshold. The second individual is who has nothing. The third individual is a debtor. It's not that he has nothing, he's in the negative, right? So, for example, and a person has nisab is at $3,000. A person has $5,000 in his bank, and on the 1st of Ramadan, and this individual presumably gives his zakat every year on the 1st of Ramadan. Now, when he looks at his account, he has $5,000 in his account. However, when he calculates his zakat, he notices that his house mortgage and his car mortgage add up to be around $50,000. Now, does he have to pay zakat? No. Why? He's $10,000 in the negative, right? He's $10,000 in the negative. So essentially, this individual is not going to be paying zakat. So again, indigent person is someone who has money, however, doesn't meet the threshold of nisab. Poor person possessing no wealth, miskeen, meaning he's zero, right? And debtor is madyun, an individual who is going to be below the line, right? He's in the negative. Now, the next recipient that is a wayfarer, meaning a person who is traveling essentially, and so and they don't have the wealth. Let's just say they're wealthy at home. They have a lot of wealth at home. It's just that they don't have any access to their wealth when they're traveling. So an example of that would be someone who's traveling and they got robbed. Right? Now they have no access to their wealth. They lost their passport, they lost their credit cards, they lost everything, their phone. Now they don't have any access to their wealth. Can we give zakat to an individual can we give zakat to someone of this nature? Sure, you can give zakat to someone of this nature. Although he or she may be wealthy when considering what they have at home, the assets, liquid or illiquid assets that they have at home. A Muslim soldier who's cut off from his troops, right? Again, if he's given that he's cut off from his troops, one can give him zakat as financial aid for him to be able to get back. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, over here we discussed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We discussed 5. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses 8. Now, they're applicable and you can say non-applicable, right? Or inapplicable recipients. Now, amongst the inapplicable recipients are the official zakat collector of the Muslim state. For example, right? If someone goes through an organization to pay their zakat, the organization doesn't have the right to use the zakat money. So Islamically, official zakat collector has a certain amount, has a certain right to be able to use the zakat money, which is stipulated by the government. Whereas an organization which is mediating zakat, the payment of zakat for individuals, doesn't have the right to give. For example, masajid, right? You can't give your zakat to masajid, although they're acting as a mediator for you to be able to pay your zakat. They accept, the organization takes your zakat and passes it on to individuals who are eligible. However, the organization itself doesn't have the feasibility to use the zakat money for themselves. Slave working towards freedom, because slavery is no longer present in our times, and those whose heart have to be reconciled. At the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were certain individuals who Rasulullah gave zakat to bring them closer to Deen. And at the time of, during the life of Umar radiallahu anhu, there was consensus of the Sahaba that this category no longer exists. Now let's look at individuals who are not going to be, who are not eligible to receive zakat. Now, they may be ineligible to receive zakat because of their position from you. They may be ineligible to receive zakat just because of who they are as individuals, or because obviously they don't. They have the amount. Okay, one example is ascendants and descendants. So you're looking at your whoever goes up and whoever goes down, meaning your parents, your grandparents, and keep going up. Your children or your grandchildren, essentially you're going up and you're going down. So either way, you can't give zakat. You can't give zakat to your parents. You can't give zakat to your grandparents. You can't give zakat to your children or grandchildren onwards, right? What you can do is give zakat to people who are sideways, like your siblings. You can give zakat to your nieces, your nephews, individuals who are sideways. You can give zakat to them. Ascendants and descendants, you can't. Spouse, a husband can't give zakat to his wife. A wife can't give zakat to her husband. Hashmi is a person who's from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can't give zakat to a person who is Hashimi, right? Now, sadly, there are many Hashimis, many people who are from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they are in need. Now, their dire need doesn't create an extenuating circumstance in which we are able to then make an exceptional scenario to give them zakat. What we can do is help them through other means, through hadiyah, and you create a union, whatever you do, but you can't give them zakat. Essentially, you can't give zakat, as we discussed in earlier, to non-Muslims, and you can't give zakat to organizations such as masajid or zakat organizations as well. Meaning you can give zakat to them so that they may pass it on to individuals who are worthy to receive zakat, who are eligible to receive zakat, but they themselves can't consume zakat money for their expenses. Now, before we get to the application of the scenarios, let's look at some of the questions. Again, see, the thing is, you're looking at, well, if you're looking at taxes, yes, perhaps you can deduct your taxes. Now, home insurance, you'll have to see whether it's a incurred expense or it's a potential expense, right? If it's a potential expense, which is I'm going to be paying for my home insurance for the next month, then potential expenses are not going to be considered. Home insurances generally, from my understanding, are potential expenses. It's not that you're paying for the past year, you're paying for the year up the upcoming year, or you're once the month has passed, then you're paying for that month, right? So home insurance is not that you owe them a chunk and you're giving them in increments. It's that you give them what you're owed, right? So home insurance, you're not going to consider the entire amount of the home insurance for the year. But what you do, you can consider is that you owe the government tax, okay, and you have to pay them tax. Once the tax is owed, yes, that's an incurred expense. You can subtract that from the zakat. The question is, does mortgage property include tax and home insurance and everything of that nature when deducting zakat? Now, the second question is, are car lease payments allowable deduction, okay, to be paid in the next 12 months? No, right? Lease is not going to be, just like your rent of a house is not going to be considered. The car lease payments are not going to be considered. Why? You're paying for every single month. It's not a incurred expense, it's a potential expense, right? So although you are in a contract with them, irrelevant of that, you're paying them monthly or otherwise. So the car lease payments, similar to a house, are not going to be considered or not going to be subtracted out when calculating zakat. Okay. Now, let's apply some of the scenarios, right? I hope everyone has like a basic understanding of how we calculate zakat, who receives it, who doesn't receive it, things of that nature. Let's try to understand that through practical application of theory. Now, Zaid has 400, again, we're looking at zakatable assets and non-zakatable assets. Zaid has $500 in his bank, and he owns a house worth $100,000 and a car worth $10,000. Is he liable? Meaning, does he have to pay zakat? And if yes, how much? And if no, is he eligible to receive zakat? Now, what are we looking at? We're looking at zakatable assets. Okay, cash. Remember, cash is always zakatable. So he has $500 zakat. And again, what are we looking at? I hope everyone is able to see. Assume nisab is $500. Okay. Although it's unlikely that if you're taking gold nisab, it'll be $500. Gold nisab generally these days amounts in like $3,000 or so. But again, we're assuming nisab is around $500. Zaid has $499 cash in his bank. That's a zakatable asset. A house worth $100,000, assuming he's living in that house, it's not for resale, that house is not going to be zakatable. It's not going to be considered in his zakat calculation. A car that he has for his personal use is not a zakatable asset. Does he have to pay zakat? No, he doesn't have to pay zakat. Can he receive zakat? Yes, he can receive zakat. Why? Because he's below the threshold of nisab, which is $500. Okay? And he doesn't have any other, again, this is all he owns. He doesn't have any other business inventory, anything else, which is going to then hinder his quality of receiving zakat, his eligibility of receiving zakat. Okay. Now, what you have is the second scenario, right? Zaid has $100 in his bank, a house worth $100,000, and 2 vacation properties, each worth $50,000. Is he liable for zakat? Right. And if yes, how much? If no, is he eligible for receiving zakat? Now you have, again, let's look at his zakatable assets, cash in bank, $100. Is it zakatable? Yes. Cash is always zakatable, irrelevant of why you're storing it or if you're saving up or not. So cash is always going to be considered when calculating zakat. A house worth $100,000 and 2 vacation properties. Now, his house that he's living in is a personal item, essentially. It's for personal basic needs. Again, we have basic needs and then we have business needs, right? So we have basic things that are under the category of basic needs, which are your houses, your clothes that I mentioned earlier, your clothes, your shoes, whatever, or your cars, as long as for personal use, is going to be under the terminology of basic needs. Now you have, he has $100 in his bank, a house worth $100,000. And again, you're more than welcome to give the answer in the chat box for this. $100 in his bank, a house worth $100,000. Is his house zakatable? No, his house is not zakatable. Vacation properties, they're for personal usage, not for resale. They're for personal usage. Are his vacation properties zakatable? No, they're not zakatable. So essentially, how much is he left with? His zakatable assets are $100 in his bank. That's all he has when calculating zakat, for paying zakat, liable for paying zakat. Now, when looking at, is he eligible to receive zakat? Now, his house is his basic need that he's using, right? However, his vacation property is not technically a part of his basic need. It's not like he uses his vacation property day in and day out, right? It's not something which is a part of his actual need, right? Although it's in that category, it's not part of his actual need itself. Like the car that he uses, the house that he lives in, these are basic needs, the clothes that he wears. Vacation properties, also, although they're personal assets, they're technically under the terminology of basic needs. When receiving zakat, we're going to look at whether you're using this asset or you're not using it. Is it in addition to what you need or you don't need, right? So vacation properties are in addition to what an individual needs. So can he receive zakat? No. Why? Because he has $100,000 worth of assets which are above, although personal, they're above his basic needs, right? And therefore, he can't receive zakat. Right? So he's in that middle state where he neither has to give zakat, nor can he receive zakat. Now, the question is, for cash, does a person have to have it for? Right, let me get this. Does a person have to have it for 1 year? At least 1 year. The way you're looking at it is, at the beginning of the year, let's just say, which is the first of Ramadan, you own Nisab amount. So Nisab, assuming Nisab is $500, you owned $1,000. Okay, at the beginning of the year, which is the first of Ramadan, that's when you calculate your zakat every year. Okay, you paid your zakat. After paying your zakat, you had what? $1,000 left. Now, for the next year, you started with $1,000. Nisab is how much? $500, assuming Nisab is $500. Now, during the year, you had fluctuations. Your $1,000 went down, it went up. $1,000 went to 5,000. They went back to 500. They went back to 200, which is below Nisab, right? And then by next Ramadan, you didn't have 1,000, you had 10,000. You won't say that technically the only amount upon which a year passed is $1,000. No, you're going to consider all $10,000 that you now have at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, for zakat. You're going to pay zakat, which is 2.5% on all $10,000. Okay. So that's how you would calculate your cash. Not that you would see this, this $500 came in on this day, and I'm only eligible to pay until the year. I received $500 on, let's just say, the first of Muharram. I'm only going to pay zakat on that $500 specifically the next Muharram. No. When you reach the end of your zakat year, which is, for example, the first of Ramadan, you're just going to look at whatever you have at that point. Okay. Now, the next question is, what about gold that we wear every day? Gold that we wear every day, again, gold, irrelevant of the form, irrelevant of what it's used for, it's used or it's not used, it's whether it's, it's always on, my finger, my wedding ring, or it's the bracelets that I wear, or it's the gold that is in my locker that I've never worn since since I got married. All of that gold, and this is generally where it's problematic sometimes, or it's not problematic. It's more interesting for women to calculate their zakat. Is generally women have more gold and silver and things of that nature compared to men. Now, do the gold that you wear and the gold that you don't wear, irrelevant of the form of the gold, whether you're using it or not, it's always going to be considered in zakat. Now, what you can do is you can consider the amount of gold that you have in your thing, in your jewelry. For instance, the stones, you don't have to necessarily weigh everything, meaning including the stones, meaning precious stones are not going to be considered in your zakat. Right? If I have, a bunch of diamonds, they're not for business, they're for my personal usage, or I just like to collect diamonds, for example, they're not going to be considered. Even if my entire jewelry is just, gold and precious stones. Now, when I'm calculating my zakat, I'm only going to calculate on the weight of the gold, not the precious stones, right? I can get that, figured out by someone who's an expert and remove that weight and only consider the amount of gold. Even in gold, if there's 18 karat, there's 14 karat, there's 24 karat. 24 karat being the purest that you can generally get. You can essentially value the amount of gold that you have within your jewelry. So 18 karat isn't pure gold. There's gold and there are other metals, right? Besides gold and silver, no other metal is going to be used for zakat. So if your gold is 18 karat, it means it has other metals as well. Given that those other metals aren't silver, you're only going to calculate the zakat for the amount of gold present. You can generally get the value of that online. You can do the math, inshallah, for that. So you weigh the amount of jewelry you have, and you see whether it's pure or impure, and you want to subtract the amount, which is like the stones and the impurities in that gold. Next is, okay, that's good. Okay. Next is, if someone purchased a property with the intention of collecting rent, may sell if situation force. Is that property eligible for zakat? Look, their assets. Okay, let's look at it this way. This is something that generally comes in for individual questions, right? So you have a property that you bought not with the intention of business, right? For resale. You bought it for personal usage. Now you intend on selling it forward. The intention itself is not going to change anything, right? Now, rental properties are, in technicality, considered within personal property. You're only going to pay zakat on the income that you receive from the rental property, the rent that you receive. You're not going to pay zakat on the value of the property itself. Even if you had the intention that, one day I'll sell it, currently is being used for your personal income. Therefore, it's not going to be considered a resale property, right? It'll still be considered a rental property. Once you put it on sale, right? You put it in the market, you put it on sale. That's when is going to be considered a resale property. And that's when this is again, something which was personal before, and then it turned into a business property. So your rental property was personal, technically, and then it turned into a business property when you put it on sale. Only when you put it on sale will it be considered as a business property. Until then, you're only going to pay zakat on the income that you received. Okay. Next is, how can I calculate zakat on gold jewelry above Nisab from Pakistan? Do I have to look at gold price in USA on first Ramadan, or do I have to look at the gold price in Pakistan? Essentially, if you're living, right, you want to consider where you're living. Business assets are understood, but what we own, we generally want to consider where we're living. Next question. Give me 1 second. This is hard. Okay, how about if one lives in an apartment and has a rental property worth of 10,000? Is it required to give zakat on the rental property? Again, it's relevant of whether you're living in the rental property, where you're living. The rental properties that you own and you're receiving money from are not going to be considered, the value of those properties is not going to be considered in zakat. Only the income that you receive. Okay. Outstanding credit card balance, yes, it's deductible. Okay, let's move to the next set of scenarios. Okay, the next set of scenarios is, now again, we're assuming that Nisab is $500. Now Zaid has $250 in the bank. Again, we're looking at zakatable assets, non-zakatable assets. He has $250 in the bank. That's cash, that's zakatable. A house worth $100,000. Now, is the house zakatable? No, right? It's not zakatable. Why? He's living in it. One rental property worth $50,000. Is the rental property, the value of the rental property, which is $50,000, is that zakatable? No, it's not zakatable. Okay. He has a total of $300 in rental income. So he has 250 plus 300 cash. His rental income and 250 in bank. In addition to his bank balance, how much zakat will he pay? Again, we're assuming Nisab is $500 here. So this adds up to essentially $550. So he's paying 2.5% of $550. Right? Assuming that zakat is $500. Okay. Next scenario. Zaid has $250 in the bank, a house worth $100,000, one resale property worth $50,000, and one property for rent worth $75,000. How much zakat will he pay? Again, let's look at the zakatable assets and non-zakatable assets. What you have is $250 cash in the bank. That's zakatable, right? Cash is always zakatable. A house worth $100,000. Now, given that it's his personal house he's living in, most probably, it's not going to be considered a house worth $100,000. It's not going to be considered zakat, a zakatable asset. So we're leaving that to the side. One resale property. Now, resale properties are essentially your business inventory. So we do look at the value of the house. Now, the resale property is $50,000. Will we add that? Yes. Why? Resale properties, not rental, but resale properties are zakatable assets. So you have $250 and $50,000. And one property for rent. Again, rental property is not, and resale property is zakatable. So you have $50,000 and $250 of zakatable assets. So he's essentially going to pay 2.5% of that. You can do the math, inshallah. Let's get to a question regarding rental income. Question is, if monthly rental income is $1,000, question is, if monthly rental income is $1,000, so zakat will be paid on 12 months times 1,000. No, that's not how we're looking at it. It's not that you receive $1,000 of rent every single month, so therefore at the end of the year you're going to pay zakat on $12,000. No, whatever cash you have left from the income, right? So it's as if you're simply receiving money from your job, right? Whatever. It's not that you say that I get paid, $5,000 every month, and I'll add that up at the end of the year and pay zakat on the whole amount. No, you pay zakat on whatever is left at the end of the month. So it's similar to that. I'm sorry, not at the end of the month, at the end of the lunar year, when you calculate your zakat. Okay, now next scenario is Zaid. Again, keep in mind, we're assuming the Nisab is 500. Is it likely? It's very unlikely. If we're taking gold standard, it's very unlikely that the Nisab will be 500. But again, we're assuming Nisab is 500. Zaid has $10,000 in the bank, a factory property worth 100,000, and machinery worth 50,000. Okay. Again, we said business assets. The things that you sell are going to be considered business assets. He doesn't sell machinery. He uses the machinery to make assets, right? He uses the machinery to make assets. So machinery is not going to be considered when calculating zakat. So if someone has a factory, the factory itself is worth, the property of the factory itself is worth $100,000. Now machinery worth $50,000 and an inventory worth $5,000. So again, the property of the factory itself is not a business asset that he's selling, right? The machinery that he's using is not a business asset that he's selling. So let's just say his factory is of you can say jackets, right? He has machinery. The factory, the value of the factory of the property itself is worth 100,000. The machinery is worth 50,000. That's 150,000. Yet he's not going to consider that in his zakat calculation. Okay. What he will consider is the business inventory, which is worth $5,000. So he has $10,000 in the bank and $5,000 worth of business inventory. When calculating zakat, he'll only calculate on $15,000, 2.5% of $15,000. Okay. Question: if you cover this, have $50,000 in my 401k, I'm still working and I haven't cashed it out. Is there some way yes. So again, 401ks, you're going to pay zakat on the 401ks. Now, we'll come to this inshallah in the next scenario. Zaid has $10,000 in the bank, $5,000 in 401k. Now there's vested and there's unvested or non-vested, right? So $2,500 contributed by him, which is his vested amount, and $2,500 by the company match, which is, again, depending on vested or non-vested, right? Depending on vested or non-vested. And he has machinery worth 20,000 and inventory worth 2,500. There is a $1,000 fine to withdraw, assuming this, right? There is a $1,000 fine to withdraw from the 401k at this moment, right? If you were to withdraw at this moment, there's a $1,000 fine. How much zakat should he pay if the 401k is still vested? And what would he do if it's unvested? So we have two scenarios here. Scenario number one is, what if it's vested? So you have $10,000 in the bank, and the $5,000 is now split. The vested amount is 2,500, and the unvested amount is 2,500. So that we're taking $10,000 cash, that's definitely zakatable, and we're taking the vested amount from the 401k, which is $2,500. Now his machinery, again, what did we say about machinery? As long as, if he's not selling the machinery, then it's not business inventory. You're not going to take the value of the machinery, right? So what you have essentially is machinery worth 20,000. You're going to put that to the side. That's not zakatable. Now inventory, however, is zakatable. So you're adding 10,000 plus the vested amount in the 401k, which is 2,500, and inventory which is worth 2,500. So you have $15,000. Okay. Now what you won't, again, we said that current incurred expenses and debts are going to be something which are subtractable, right? You subtract that amount from zakat when calculating zakat. The question is, given the fact that you're going to be fined $1,000 if you were to withdraw your 401k at the moment, will you consider that as a valid subtraction from your zakat? Meaning, I don't calculate that. I don't. So in this scenario, we have $15,000. So instead of paying the 2.5% of 15,000, I subtract the $1,000 and pay zakat on 14,000. No, I don't pay zakat on 14,000. I pay zakat on 15,000. Why? Because technically, if I was not going to withdraw it, then I'm never going to incur that expense. If an individual, he waits till he retires and then receives his 401k, even then, he's not going to then have to pay this fine. So technically, it's not It's not an incurred expense at the time. It's not a debt at the moment. So therefore, in this scenario, Zaid has $10,000. The first scenario, right? $10,000 in the bank, 2,500 of vested amount in his 401k, and 2,500 of his inventory. Now the second scenario is if all of the amount is vested, meaning he has $10,000 in the bank, cash, that's zakatable. $5,000, all of it is vested. The one he gave and the company's match as well. All of it is vested. And $2,500 worth of inventory. We already said machinery and the $1,000 fine is not going to be considered. So you have 10,000 plus 5,000 and then plus 2,500. You have 17,500. Question: to add to 401k, what is a person? What if a person doesn't have enough cash to pay zakat on vested amount? Now, again, you're looking at what you have in the 401k and you're looking at the liquid assets at hand, right? The question is, you have, for example, $100,000 in your 401k. However, what you don't have is the amount, the liquid assets, meaning you don't have cash at hand to be able to, by which you're able to pay the zakat for $100,000. So you don't have $2,500 worth of cash at hand, but you do have to calculate the $100,000 in your 401k. Now, this is a valid scenario where you can delay, for example, your 401k. So essentially what you can do is that the zakat for $100,000, you take, what you're doing is that you calculate throughout the years. And one possible option is that you pay when you receive the 401k. Okay? You calculate every year and you add to your zakat, right? So what you're looking at essentially is, let's just say the first year you have $100,000. Let's take a simple scenario, right? First year you have $100,000. The zakat for that is 2.5% of the $100,000 itself, which is, all right, 2,500. Now the next year, let's assume, right, simply for the sake of example, right, let's assume that you still have $100,000 the next year in your 401k. It's not that you're going to take out 2.5% of the 100,000 again. Remember, zakat that you have to pay is considered as a subtraction. You're going to subtract that. So the 2,500 that you calculated for the last year is going to be subtracted this year from the 401k. Understand? So you're paying 97,000 zakat, or 2.5% of 97,500 this time, right? Whereas in the previous year, you paid on, you calculated for 100,000. Question: if a person calculates zakat and finds out that he has to pay $5,000 zakat, at the same time he owes $20,000 income tax for the current year, does he still need to pay zakat? Okay. So essentially, what zakat for the previous year, like for example, I had to pay zakat on $100,000 at the first of Ramadan. I didn't have any debts or anything. I had $100,000 cash on which I had to pay zakat. Now what happened is, this $100,000 I didn't pay zakat on, which is 2,500. I didn't pay zakat on these 100,000. Next year, I ended up, although I have $100,000 still in my bank, I ended up incurring an expense and I'm in debt by $500,000 now. Does my zakat suddenly fall, is my zakat out of the picture now? Do I no longer have to pay zakat? No. What became fard last year is going to still remain, because that remained fard and that's in your lot now. This year's zakat calculation, just because your debts are more than your assets, you're not going to have to pay zakat. Does that make sense? I just hope that makes sense. So the zakat that became fard last year, you're going to hold on to that. You're going to pay it. Just because you don't have liquid at hand doesn't mean you're not going to pay it. You'll eventually, inshallah, pay it. Any other questions before we move on? Let's look at a few more scenarios. Okay. Two more, inshallah. Assuming Nisab is $500, and just keep on reminding that. Zaid has $400 in the bank, cash, right? And his wife has $40,000 in gold and silver. MashaAllah. How much zakat should he pay? Again, zakat is an individual fard. It's a individual fard. So when Zaid is going to be zakat, calculating his zakat, his wife Zainab, for example, has $40,000. If Nisab is $500 and Zaid only has $400 in bank, that's the only zakatable asset he has. Okay? He doesn't have business inventory, he doesn't have 401k, he doesn't have anything else. All he has, he doesn't have resale properties and nothing of that nature. $400 in his bank. Does he have to calculate his wife's $40,000 as well? Zakat from the gold, which is worth, gold and silver worth $40,000? No, he doesn't. All he has to calculate is whether he is eligible to or liable to pay zakat, for paying zakat, or eligible for receiving zakat. Okay. So Zaid in this scenario would calculate his personal zakat individually, and his wife would calculate her zakat individually, which is she has to pay 2.5% of 40,000, and Zaid doesn't have to pay zakat because he only has 400, and the nisab amount is 500. The threshold for nisab is 500. Next scenario is Zainab has $10,000. Again, the husband paying zakat for the wife is one thing, but him having to calculate it and consider it fard upon himself is another. Zakat is an individual fard. However, if someone pays, is a separate scenario. That would be okay. Zainab has $10,000 in the bank. Okay. Again, cash. Automatically, you have cash, it's zakatable. Gold that she wears worth $50,000. Silver that she does not wear worth $500. And diamonds worth $30,000. How much zakat should she pay? Remember, we said gold and silver by nature are always going to be zakatable, irrelevant of which form they're in. Okay, so the $10,000 automatically zakatable. $50,000 automatically zakatable. Why? It's gold. $500, which is her silver, although she doesn't wear it, it's still going to be zakatable. Or vice versa, although she utilizes and wears gold worth of $50,000, mashallah, that $50,000 worth of gold, although it's for personal use, given that it's gold, is going to be zakatable. So you have 10,000 plus 50, which is 60,000, and again 5 more hundred with this, which is $60,500. And diamonds worth 30,000. Are we going to consider diamonds as zakatable? No. Why? Because they're not precious metals. If they're for personal usage, they're for personal, they're considered quote unquote personal assets. They're not for resale. They're not for as a business. They're not your business inventory. Then $30,000 worth of diamonds, even if they're $30,000 worth, you're not going to consider that in your zakat. You can just simply have them, period. Now, how much zakat should she pay? We're looking at $10,000 cash, $50,000 worth of gold, and $500 worth of silver. So that's $60,500. So 2.5% of that. Okay. Any other questions? I hope these scenarios kind of give a more practical understanding of how we are supposed to calculate our zakat. And I do hope that the overall presentation we were able to get a better understanding of how we're able to pay our zakat and get a more simplistic understanding of it as well. Right. Are shares and stocks zakatable? Yes. I think we covered this a little bit in the beginning. Shares and stocks are zakatable, right? You're going to consider the value of the stock and you're going to take out zakat, the value of that stock on that day. The other thing is, the other question that I generally get is volatile stocks, where the price fluctuates. Now essentially what you're looking at is the maghrib, whatever the price of in volatile stocks, whatever the price of the stock was, at the end of that day, right? So let's just say maghrib of the day on which zakat becomes fard on you. So you pay zakat on the first of every Ramadan. So the maghrib of the day before that, right? The last day of Sha'ban. The last day of Sha'ban, the maghrib of the last day of Sha'ban, whatever the price of the stock was at that point, even if it's a volatile stock, what you're going to pay, take the value of the stock at that point and then pay the amount. Next question, do we subtract debt that is on 0%, i.e. not all due this year, from our zakatable amount? And second, is the total debt of the house subtracted from all eligible zakat assets before calculating it? Again, let's go to the second question first. The total debt of the house, for example, the house is worth $500,000. When calculating zakat, you're not going to subtract $500,000. No, you owe them. Let's just say you owe the finance institution. You owe the UIF, for example, the Islamic institution or guidance. You owe them. Let's take UIF. You owe UIF. Let's just say $10,000 this year. $50,000 are not going. $500,000 are not going to be considered. You're only going to subtract $10,000 that you owe them this year when you're calculating zakat. You're not going to subtract $500,000 from your zakat. Okay. Now the first question is, do we subtract debt that is on 0%? I think that that includes it. Any other questions? Okay. How do we determine if something is a resale property? Is this any time during the zakat year when the zakat day is due? No, we're not. When in a resale property is going to be a resale property. Meaning, for example, when you were buying the house, you intended it to be for resale. Okay. So when you bought the house, you knew that you were going to fix it up and sell it, for example, right? You flip houses. So you knew that you were going to fix it up and sell it. Now that is automatic, given the fact that when you were buying the house, your intention was for tijara, was for business, right? So given the fact that the house, when you bought it with the intention of resale, you're going to take the intention of the house, the intention that you had when you bought the house, when you bought the item. If you bought the item, if you bought the asset, house or anything else, if you bought it with the intention of resale, then you're going to consider it in your zakat calculation. If you bought it for personal usage, then you're not going to consider it for your zakat calculation, even if you change your intention. So for example, I bought a house in the beginning of the year for personal usage. Then I decided, you know what, I'm not going to hold on to this. I want to sell it. That's only my intention. So when I'm calculating zakat at the end of the year, I'm still holding on to this house that I initially bought as personal and later changed my intention for business. Am I going to calculate the value of this house in zakat, in my zakat calculation? No. The only time I'll calculate the value of this house is if or when I put this house on sale. Then I'll calculate this house as zakat, in my zakat. I hope that answers the question. Okay. That answers the first question. If we still have, yes. Again, I'll inshallah post my email and my number on the group. And if you have any questions, any additional questions, you can always email me, you can always text me or call me, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll suffice with that.